So, what led you to Stoicism?
So I was working at The Guardian in Australia and I was doing a weekly column, which um, essentially I was trying something different each week. And a friend of mine was working on the foreign desk, and she got a press release from, I think it was Sussex University, saying that they were doing Stoic Week. And this was, this, please like publicize it so people can join. And she said, "Oh, you should do this for your column." So I joined Stoic Week online and wrote a piece about it. But look, it was a week where I was partying a lot. I was hungover. I didn't really give Stoic Week its full my full attention, and wrote a kind of amusing column about it, and then heard from actual practicing Stoics who'd also done Stoic Week saying that they were disappointed that in the article because it didn't, Stoicism can change lives, and I'd kind of made light of the experience. So I took that criticism to heart insofar as I went back and did Stoic Week the following year, but I did it privately and recruited a few friends, and we formed a WhatsApp group. And I wanted to say, well, look, people in Stoic Week rave about it. If I just do it not for laughs, not for shits and giggles, like what's what's my experience going to be like? And it was in many ways transformative, partly because I did it with a group. So the aspects that I found difficult, I bounced off my friends in our WhatsApp group. And then it enabled me to see my friends' lives in a completely different way. Like we were very disparate groups. So there was someone with a new baby. There was someone who just joined the seminary. There was someone in real estate who was, a sales person. And we each had different pressures. And it was fascinating seeing how Stoicism helped people in all these different industries and at different points in their life. And after Stoic Week ended, I decided to go to the text, the primary text, and with a friend of mine, continue on the journey and learning and meeting with him each week and talking about things that we'd come across that week that were challenges in our lives and how Stoicism might help. And then a publisher who I was with said, this could be a book, but very much from the entry level, no, someone who's not an expert, who's a very ordinary person I did 1 year of a philosophy degree, um, and switched to politics. So I'm not coming at it from an academic point of view. I'm coming at it from a very practical point of view. And that book became Reasons Not to Worry.
Mm. Would you describe yourself as an investigative journalist, or would you describe yourself as a gonzo journalist, perhaps?
I have been described as a gonzo wellness journalist. So, um, that is, as I sip my coconut. But the gonzo wellness thing is, when I started journalism, it was in 2001, and I was doing a lot of first person, kind of more humorous reporting, and the wellness industry was adjacent. Very small industry back then. A couple of retreats, and it was adjacent to the tourism industry. I was doing a lot of travel writing, and so I'd be sent away on these trips, and I'd subject myself to all the, I'd subject myself to stuff and then write about it, and write about it in a self-deprecating way. So that's about as investigative as I get.
Do you think so? I'm interested in the connection between your two books. So you've got Wellmania and Reasons Not to Worry. It's just there's a lot of parallels between the two books, and you can see the connection between writing the first one and the second one. But what led you to writing about the wellness industry? So I know you had a health scare before writing it.
Yeah, I mean, just the health scare was more just being told by a doctor your blood pressure's really high, your cholesterol's really high, you're pre-diabetic. So all the kind of lifestyle diseases um, that come from, they come from genetics, but they also come from, you know, uh, partying in Sydney over many years, being writing about food, doing lots of trips, and just not being as healthy as I could be. So I became interested in wellness from that perspective, but I was also really interested in the kind of economic elements of it. So and also the spiritual elements. So the way that we're now pretty godless. I started writing this book or I started exploring this industry when new atheism had really kind of attached itself to the culture. Um, a lot of my friends were kind of second generation of people without religion, without a spiritual practice. And the wellness industry came along at that point to really give people sort of quasi spiritual experiences, whether that be on retreats or with psychedelics or, a whole range of products. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's worth trillions of dollars. What does our take up of this say about our society?
I think it's interesting when we talk about religion because to me, religion certainizes, that's not a word, but like, it makes certain people's lives. And I think people don't like the complexity of life without some kind of story that describes how things come about or describes what's going to happen to them if they do good things or they do bad things. And it's maybe the same, like maybe that's the gap that the wellness industry is filling, because it makes certain if people are doing all these wellness practices, then they're going to feel great about themselves and they're going to feel like nothing bad can ever happen to them, or that they can't have a health scare or anything like that. So do you think control and the certainty of the wellness industry maybe fills the gap that religion's kind of leaving?
Yeah, I think so. It, it's allowed people to properly worship their bodies in a way that is super individualistic. So, um, you had, uh, if you grew up in a church, you were very much de-individualized in that setting. You would all say the prayers in unison. You would be reciting something that was a ritual that, hundreds, thousands of years old. And when you died, you would be buried according to the rituals of that church, and certain prayers would be said. But it wasn't about you and your body and, how sacred you are. It was about the sacredness of another. So Jesus if you're looking at the Catholic tradition. And so, we now, wellness has given us permission to fully engage in the worship of ourselves. Um, and that's, on one hand, it's good to be healthy. I'm certainly not anti-health, but on the other hand, the narcissism of the industry is profound, and very unhealthy. I'm in Bali at the moment, and that is a place where, the conversations you overhear from influencers who are everywhere around Bali is depressing, because um it's all about the self. It's not about other people. It's not about necessarily about nature or philosophy or ideas. Um and it's interesting because Stoicism really is in tension with that. Stoicism says you can't control your health. You can try, but it's essentially a preferred indifferent. You can prefer to be healthy, but reality says that you must be indifferent because anything can happen. You can be hit by a truck, you can choke on a chip, whatever it is. So, yeah.
I think also, I can't remember who said it. The quote was something along the lines of, and I think it was more about politics, but it maybe applies here, that the answer lies somewhere between the two extremes. And I think with the wellness industry, you can go too far one way where you are, say, unhealthy, profoundly unhealthy, and that's making your life worse. Or you can go too far the other way and be so focused on your health that you never actually have fun, and you're always eating plain chicken and rice. And so it's usually it has to be somewhere between the two extremes, surely, that
Yeah.
you can have fun, which is good for your mind anyway, and you're also just taking care of yourself and hopefully feeling good about that as well.
Yeah, the answer is always moderation in everything. And that's another Stoic virtue is moderation. So, you know, they say they're interesting on alcohol, actually, the Roman Stoics. Like they say things like, go to the parties, but practice just drinking water, refuse the drinks. Like, so be social, be amongst people, um, but don't lose your mind. Don't go too fast. So, it's I'm as much susceptible to fads as the next person. Like Wellmania, there was a lot of kind of testing of fad diets, fad movements, fad exercise regimes. And I road test them all in Wellmania. But the healthiest person I met in that whole journey was a guy I went on a camping trip with him to Northern Australia. We were doing some bird watching, and he was in his 90s and he was much fitter than I was. He's bouncing around, kind of climbing up and down gorges and up very early, like, spotting the amazing birds because he had brilliant eyesight. And we ended up in a town called Cooktown after the journey into the sort of more remote parts of Australia. And there was a market and they were selling turmeric lattes. And this guy's like, what is this? And it's like, oh, it's the new thing. You'll live forever. It's like helps with inflammation. And he was just so perplexed. And I said, well, what do? You seem so healthy. And this guy was a farmer. He ate what he grew. He worked on his farm every day. So he was walking around. He had a few beers each week, or one or two beers actually, with friends on a Friday. So he had the social element, but he was never, he didn't abuse alcohol. And yeah, he's probably still alive today. That was 10 years ago. Um, so that's how I think people used to live. Is much harder to live like that now. So we have to kind of buy in, you know, the elements of how that guy was actually naturally living. And you buy it in through, maybe a gym membership. You buy it in through supplements. You might buy it in through organic food. Suddenly you're spending a lot of money to live in a kind of natural way that people used to live many years ago. But we just can't live like that now. It's not feasible for all of us to go and have our organic farms.
Yeah, I think also just having an awareness of your health is half the battle. It's just being aware of what you're putting in your body and what you're drinking and such like that. Like recently, I've kind of taken more ownership over my alcohol use. In that, like, I never was like a very big drinker, but more recently I've realized that I would just have a drink just because that's we're going to a pub or we're going to a bar or we're going to see a show or something like that. You have a drink, and I've more realized like taking a bit of ownership and actually becoming aware of it. Do I actually want a drink now? I'm only maybe going to have two or three. Is that really what I want to do? And it's just this simple awareness of it kind of means I can take ownership over it. And so I think awareness over your health is half the battle, as well as being aware of how much fun you have, making sure that you're
Yeah.
actually enjoying life. Because you can't, like, if you're going weeks and weeks without ever having, I don't know, a cheeseburger or some pizza, then God, what are you living for?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I also think the social aspect is really important. So,
Yeah, for sure.
um, I mean, I'm not drinking at the moment. I started dry January. I'm still going. I'm loving it. But have to be very careful not to cut myself off from the pub or socializing. It's extremely important, I think, to have social connections. And Australia, and I'm definitely sure Scotland is the same. Social connections are formed at the pubs. So, is there a way of doing that, of being with other people in a social environment, having fun, being a bit silly, but not, having 20 drinks and throwing up everywhere and, or getting McDonald's at the end of the night. Um, I think the younger generation, like Gen Z, are very much more, you see them at Yochi getting their frozen yogurt on a Saturday night. Um, you know, part of me is like, oh, party guys, like it's fun because you're in your 20s. Like, but then I also have respect for people that learn these lessons early. I tend to learn things late.
Yeah, I think with the younger generation, like I think Scott Galloway, I don't know if you're aware of him. Like
Yeah, I
he
am.
speaks a lot
Yeah.
about the kind of stats around young people, and his big thing is like a lot of young people just aren't dating, or they're not connecting in that way. And so his big thing is like, don't go and drink to excess, but go out and have a drink and connect with other people. And you can make some mistakes, and that's great. You'll look back and like I've made tons of mistakes because of alcohol. I don't look back and regret any of
Yeah.
them, but
Yeah.
that's his whole thing. Like don't just stay at home and scroll on social media. Like that's not connecting with people in a healthy way. And as much as you might be worried about like the health consequences of alcohol, his big thing is the health consequences of disconnection are far greater than, say, the health consequences of having a few drinks at the weekend.
Yeah, and I think studies have shown that because there's always these weird studies of like all these people who live till 100 and they drink, like,
Yeah.
and the people who are completely abstemious, live less, live less amount of time. So, one of the theories is that the social connections, the bonds formed over a drink, or sharing a bottle of wine with your friends or your partner or whatever, um, creates, a great feeling in your body, happiness, you live longer, always saying no, maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think also just like I recently went on a night out with my work, and just the social lubricant I feel like that's having I think I only had about 3 or 4 pints. It's not a lot, but it's not so little either. But just the social lubricant of that, I was able to like go round the whole group that were out and like speak to each person individually, and I'm speaking about things that I would never like be confident enough to speak on, and I can't remember like clearly, but I'm sure I was speaking succinctly and I was speaking articulately. And so I just think, yeah, there's a profound effect that alcohol can have that people maybe don't take into consideration enough now.
Yeah, and also just on the younger person thing, there is this thing of cringe of like, I don't want to make a
Yeah.
dick. I need to be in control. If I get too drunk and make a dick of myself, cringe. And it's like, no, cringe is like, we need to be more cringe because the cringe moments are what bonds people and binds people, and being vulnerable and being a bit stupid. And then your mate can be cringe in front of you because you've been cringe first. Um, that's, it's
Yeah.
priceless.
Yeah. And getting back to Stoicism, so I want to speak about some of the kind of common criticisms of Stoicism and see if we can maybe debunk them a bit. So one of the big ones
Yeah.
is that Stoicism is the avoidance of feeling emotions. Um, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I disagree. So this is obviously a couple of uses of the word stoicism. There is the kind of common use, which is stoic, a person that doesn't cry at a funeral, that is very stiff upper lip. Uh, and so when I told like friends of mine that I was doing a book on stoicism, they're like, "You're not very stoic," and they were thinking of that definition. Um, I see the ancient Stoics as being people who were interested in suffering less, so Stoicism kind of came about and it's got all sorts of really interesting tricks is the wrong word, but it's ways of seeing the world and ways of being in the world that attempt to minimize suffering. So that that is not emotionless. That is more just not having an excess of emotion, particularly negative emotion, um, that's going to derail your life if it doesn't need to be derailed, or if you don't need to have that emotion. So, um, yeah,
You've spoken about the image of Stoicism maybe being very much male orientated. I think for me anyway, the way I see it is like when perhaps toxically masculine men maybe co-opt the word and quote certain people, Marcus Aurelius for instance, and then make a point that's perhaps misogynistic or that excludes women. So Andrew Tate's one that comes to mind. I think that's maybe where most people are maybe thinking Stoicism is, say, a more masculine or a more male dominated philosophy. What's your
Yeah, I
thoughts?
mean, yeah, it's obviously was dominated by men back in
Of course,
ancient
yeah.
Greece and Rome because they're the people that were allowed to be the thinkers, the public thinkers. Although there are a couple of exceptions of women who practiced or had talked about Stoicism and did some writing. How it's developed now, like this iteration of Stoicism, it is very much in a sort of like a manosphere. I suspect um, that is just a marketing thing, like it's Stoic sounds tough. It's got those tough connotations that we were talking about. If you're a man who's like a bit, you know, doesn't want to be seen reading a self-help book, you might go to the bookstore and get something by, say, Ryan Holiday, who's an excellent person, not in the manosphere at all, or one of those guys, and feel comfortable and safe with this book because it's been it's not a Brene Brown book. It's not something that's about vulnerability. It's a more socially acceptable philosophy, and so that I don't feel like that excludes women though. Like with Reasons Not to Worry, that came out a few years ago. Talking to booksellers, a lot of men bought it, but also a lot of women bought it. It was very kind of equal in terms of readership. And what I found when I was coming to Stoicism quite cold, I didn't really go into the manosphere at all. I did read an interesting book by Donna Zuckerberg and that's Mark Zuckerberg's sister, called Not All Dead White Men, which was trying to kind of wrestle or reconfigure the classics away from the manosphere. And I just thought that was a fascinating book, particularly considering her family, like who her brother is. And I found when I was looking though at the actual kind of primary texts like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, there was nothing really specifically masculine or feminine about them. Like they were extremely neutral. Marcus Aurelius's sort of um, teachings on anger and how to be a good man are very, they'd be called now beta or whatever, but I think they're very, um, they're very beautiful and they're not about using aggression and they're not about using force or humiliating anyone. It's almost Jesus-like in some respects. So yeah, I don't think the original like Stoics were infected by misogyny.
Yeah, I think it is what you're saying is a marking problem. It's an image
Yeah.
problem. I think that's maybe
Yeah.
why women maybe don't go towards it, or maybe think that it's about generals and emperors and so what like armies
Yeah.
or things like that. Maybe they think that it is that denouncing emotions and ignoring your emotions and things like that, and they maybe don't think they can approach it. So I think it's a marking problem more than anything else.
Yeah. It's interesting though, like the Let Them book, which is a huge, I haven't
Yeah.
actually read it, but it's huge. But that's essentially a Stoic teaching.
Yeah.
It's you can't control someone else, so let them. And I don't know if Mel Robbins has read any Stoicism, but it's a very Stoic kind of
Yeah.
principle, and that book's huge with women.
Mhm.
I think I think the original Stoics just dealt with the problem of being alive,
Yeah.
and that's not a male problem; it's an everyone problem.
For sure. Do you think there's room for self compassion within Stoicism?
Um, I think there's room for. I wouldn't say self-compassion. That seems to be a very Buddhist word. I think there's room for self-improvement and so they say if we take journaling, which is a very Stoic kind of practice, at the end of every night, like say Marcus Aurelius writing Meditations, it was, what did I do today? How did I let myself down? What can I do better tomorrow? So they were always reaching for the virtues. And in that there was the acknowledgement that they were human, they were fallible, they were learning. No, look, none of these guys ever said that they were a sage or had reached the kind of Stoic nirvana. There was always room for them to get better. And that I don't think makes them uncompassionate towards themselves, but I don't think self-compassion really is part of the lexicon of Stoicism, whereas self-improvement definitely is.
Mm. Do you, with your practice of Stoicism, do you, how would you say, like, do you almost like use Stoicism on its own, or do you have other, I don't know, like practices you use? So I think maybe people think that if you're going to practice Stoicism, that's all you practice, and so there isn't any room for you to do any self-compassionate practices, for instance. Is there room for other practices to be brought in?
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of the great things, I was raised Catholic. You raised Catholic, you don't suddenly start doing a little bit of Islam or a little bit
Yeah.
of Jewish. You just don't. That's it. And the great thing about philosophy as opposed to religion is that it's not restrictive. It's Seneca said that as man or woman makes more discoveries, the philosophy will change and people's practice of it will change. So um, they were expecting that the way we practice Stoicism now, 2,000 years later, would be very different from how they do it then, because science has come along and our understanding of the brain and the unconscious has all developed. So therefore, our practice of Stoicism is going to change and also incorporate other things. So in answer to your question, I practice Vedic meditation twice a day, which is, I find the Vedic philosophy and Stoicism very, very close. And
What is Vedic? Sorry.
yeah, so the Vedas are a ancient kind of Indian, I guess they're a collection of teachings or books that are the cornerstone of Indian spirituality and philosophy, many, many thousands of years old. So I practice a form of meditation called Vedic meditation, very similar to transcendental meditation. Um, and it's just 20 minutes twice a day, just shut down, power down. Um, but I think William Dalrymple's just got a new book out now on the connection between, early Christians, the Stoics and Indian mystics, and how they must have crossed paths at some point thousands of years ago, shared knowledge, and that knowledge has cross-pollinated because there is amazing kind of crossover between the Veda and also Buddhism and Stoicism and Christianity. They're all essentially saying the same thing. And when I've interviewed people who are masters of different spiritual traditions and asked them about Stoicism, they will say that it doesn't matter what you call it. Often if you master a spiritual truth, it is the same as all the other spiritual truths. Like there is one kind of universal truth that everyone comes to, like all religions come to, like whether it be Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, so yeah. So my practice is meditation plus Stoicism, and they're not in particular conflict.
Mm. With Is there any other misconceptions around Stoicism that we haven't spoken about thus far that you want to quell?
I think I see Stoicism as a very like a street philosophy. So I see it, the word Stoic came from the Greek word stoa, which is the painted porch where philosophers and their students used to meet in the marketplace and talk about philosophy. So it's a street philosophy. That's where it started. Not a garden philosophy. It's not an academy, a university. So some people don't feel like they can enter. They don't feel like they can access Stoicism or any other philosophy because they haven't been to university, or they haven't, they say, I'm not very smart. I have only read one book. And it's like, I say, no, it's for everyone. And also, I've copped a bit from academics who are like, hey, this is my turf and you haven't done any of you haven't got a PhD in this stuff. To which I say, that is very correct. And I am very much the ground level, and people can jump in, read my books on the ground level, and then move to your level, like go up in the elevator to all the people that have really made a proper lifelong study of it. And so I think a misconception of Stoicism is that you have to have been granted permission to enter. I say no, just come on in, everyone's welcome.
I do think that, say, the person that's maybe studied philosophy their whole life but hasn't applied it to their life, compared to someone who hasn't studied it at all but then starts applying philosophy to their life, the latter person to me is more of a philosopher than the former. Because philosophy to me is like the study of life, and so you have to apply it to your life for it to be philosophy. And I think if you're like kind of sitting in your office the whole time studying it and trying to write the best paper or whatever, then that's not really philosophy. It needs to be applied to life, and then you can know if it's useful or not.
Yeah, and I also think it's these guys that were around 2,000 years ago that wrote these incredible books. Our problems are their problems. Like human. Yes, there's things that we deal with today that they didn't have. They didn't have AI, they didn't have the kind of climate change stuff that we're dealing with. But they had death of loved ones, they had illness, they had grief, they had unemployment, they had poverty, they had disease. So, and they thought very, very deeply about how to handle these things without completely falling apart. And they thought so long and hard. They studied it. They've written about it. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can go back and take what we can from them. Some of the stuff, like when I started getting into Stoicism, I couldn't believe how modern, like Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus, like they all have these very modern voices. And then you kind of go into, if you are a student of literature, you go into Chaucer or Shakespeare or whatever, and the language becomes a lot more dense and harder to unpick. But there was something very pure and crystal clear and very direct about how the Stoics wrote, and that makes it, I think, very appealing to moderns. It's very easy to understand. As I said earlier, you don't need a philosophy degree, and it's very easy to apply because a lot of the writings, particularly meditations, is essentially Marcus Aurelius trying to apply Stoicism to his life. And each night he's writing in his journal and he's saying, did I get angry today? Did I want to stay? I wanted to stay in bed this morning and sleep in, but instead I had to get up and go to work. So, I mean, who hasn't thought that? This is 2,000 years of this guy going, oh, bed's warm. This is nice here. But my nature is a man and an emperor and a husband and all these things. So I'm going to go and kind of be part of, use my nature, be in my nature, which is doing all these things and not lying around. So, yeah.
I think also, like, the remarkable thing about meditations is just that Marcus Aurelius never intended for that to be published or read by anyone, and just how beautifully written it is. But I think it also maybe shows,
it's stunning.
Yeah. I think it also just shows the power of writing for no one else but yourself. I mean, in some ways, that's how I view this podcast. Like, what I find is that the lessons I'm talking about, I'll end up going to, say, like a therapy session or something like that, And a lot of the topics I'm talking about is what I've just uploaded onto the podcast.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's I'm unconsciously trying to learn a lesson, and then it becomes conscious once I start talking about it and realize, oh, that's why I'm talking. That's why this lessons came up, or this is why this is another lesson I need to learn, or this is a repeated
Yeah.
lesson that I've still not learned yet. And it's just
Yeah.
it's the beauty of writing. Well, I mean, I'm obviously I'm recording to put things out there for people to listen to, but I think it's just the beauty of verbalizing or writing down the problems that you're facing or the lessons you need to learn. You'll see repeated patterns.
Absolutely. I've been keeping a diary for decades now, and I go back and I have the same problems that I had when I was 18, like it's the Buddhists call it and also the Vedics samskara. It's this circle of going around and around. It's a circle of hell. You've got to get out of it. And the journal is a brilliant way of mapping your samskaras, your problems, your issues that you will come up against time and time again. It also allows you to see that you've overcome stuff in the past, that, something that was like a breakup or a job loss, something that was disastrous, when you were 25, 20 years later, you might read that and go, oh, I was really depressed then, and I got through it. And so
Mm-hmm.
the journal allows you to basically see that you can survive and thrive and not to be overcome by your problems.
I think also like this year, one of the things I noticed is when it came to New Year, I could barely remember last year. I don't
Oh,
know what happened
really?
last year. Yeah, yeah. I think I've just been working too hard. I wrote an idea the last episode about freedom fallacy. It's an idea I'm coming up with where um, it's working so hard now to achieve some form of freedom later, but you do it to such an extent that you can't remember, or that you've just worked the whole year. And like
Yeah.
one of the practices I've just implemented this year is just every night write down exactly what happened that day. And so I
Yeah.
use an app called Day One. There's no affiliation, but it's just a really nice app because it has a calendar and it shows you how many days in a row you've done. You can add photos, you can add locations, and it's all like very nicely laid out. And it's just writing down everything that's happened, because last year I could remember my 30th, which was in October, onwards, because that was quite a big event. But then before that, I have no idea what happened. And it's just, I've probably just been so routinized and like every day's the same, or that I'm working every day and not really doing anything maybe spontaneous, or not really remembering anything or writing anything down. So that, I think that's just also the power of journaling. Just write down what's happened in the day, and it's nice
Yeah.
to see throughout the years.
The Stoics would be very cross at you for having had that
Yeah.
sort of, yeah, they would. I
Yeah.
really recommend reading Seneca's Letters to a Young Man, Letters to Lucilius. It's a
Mm-hmm.
brilliant book, but he's writing to a kind of younger person. And there's a really great letter about being busy. And
Yeah.
Seneca says, oh, it's these people who are so busy. Like, basically, we don't know when, you know, when we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
It could happen. It could happen next week. You could get some terrible news at a doctor. You could get hit by a bus. Um, and so this thing of getting busy for the future, or being busy for the future, of not having fun, of not seeing your friends, of being in the grind and the hustle, that's quite unstoic. Like a stoic would say, firstly, the most important thing is learning philosophy, which you're kind of actually doing via, firstly, you've studied it, but via the podcast you're doing. So you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is being in community and being in nature, and um, still doing stuff. And the Stoics were very successful, ambitious people, but they
Yeah.
certainly, you know, they they didn't work all the time. It's a lot of time spent reading, a lot of time spent talking with their friends about philosophy, a lot of time spent on ideas, and a lot of time kind of savoring life by, reflecting and journaling. So, so each day it's like, what did I do today? Oh, that's right. I had that great coffee with this person. We had an amazing chat. And so at night you're reflecting on it, and it doesn't feel like the day's just
Yeah.
passed you by. It's had some really nice things in it. So I'm never too busy now. I'm just like, I'm not busy at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not Stoic approved to be busy.
No, I mean, so I did want to actually just get your opinion on this freedom fallacy idea. So I kind of wrote down a definition. I'll read it and I'll get your take on it. So it's the idea that we postpone freedom and peace until some future point in our lives when we're more successful or have more money or more control over our time. We tell ourselves, once I've built this life, then I'll be free. But the fallacy is trying to experience the peace of a life you haven't built yet while still living in this sort of working phase that's required to build it. So you end up stuck between two voices, one telling you to push harder and get more done, and the other telling you to enjoy life now. The problem isn't working hard towards freedom, it's believing your current life doesn't count right now until you've arrived at whatever success that you're dreaming of. And that's where people burn out or end up regretting the years they spent only striving and never really living. Hence what's just happened in my last year.
Yeah.
What do
I think that's amazing. I mean, it's also very Stoic. They write about this a lot because they were ambitious, like Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. Epictetus had a huge reputation as a teacher after he was freed from slavery. And Seneca, was kind of like the Elon Musk of his time. Was an advisor to Nero, and not a great job. One of the wealthiest men in the world, also a playwright and poet. I think he was a poet, yeah. So they were huge, huge figures in the world, but they were always conscious of not, stacking or over investing in a professional career. Life was seen much more about like good food and wine, spending time with loved ones, family. They were very pro family. Community. What are you doing for your community? So a lot of their public life had a kind of social role, which was, in leadership and as public figures. The freedom fallacy thing is interesting because I have achieved many of my ambitions and it never feels as good as you think it's going to feel. It always tastes a little bit stale. So yeah, every book I do, I'm working on my 6th book. I remember when I got my first book deal, I just thought I would die of happiness. I was, it's all I wanted. And I was so happy for about, I don't know, maybe a month or two. And then with each book, the happiness has, diminished till I get this latest book deal. I'm happy for about an hour, so, so I've had a real sort of, I've had a real rethink about ambition, and I've worked in I've worked in politics, the law, television. I've had a Netflix show, writing, and now I've ticked them all off, and it's like really interesting to be without any more ambitions. That feels extremely countercultural and quite uncomfortable because ambition actually gives you purpose and meaning. And if you're not ambitious for anything, if you've ticked a lot of things off, you can be left with, a bit of a scary void. And I think that's a really interesting place to be. So yeah, I would say, yeah, beware of being too ambitious.
Yeah, it's what Chris Williamson, he's another podcaster, he calls unteachable lessons, and it's lessons that you hear over and over again. People like will say, oh, money doesn't buy happiness or certain things.
Yeah,
certain things.
Elon tweeted that the other day. Did you see
that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know. Yeah, and I think the problem with that is that people just don't listen. Like I was listening to you, and I know what you're saying is true. I know that what if this podcast takes off and I able to do it full time, that's a great thing. But and I know that it won't make me feel as satiated as I think it as I'm imagining in my head. But I'm still not listening to you. Like it's like an unteachable lesson. It's like you have to learn these lessons yourself almost. You can't, when someone else says it to you, you just don't, like everyone does it. Like you'll just listen and go, I'll be different. And I'm conscious of it, but I'm still, like it's still needed.
Also,
you know?
you've got to, I think we're wired that way actually. Otherwise nothing will get done.
Sure.
So I listened to Chris Williamson the other day. I've just kind of discovered him. A bit later than everyone else. But and I did listen to him talking about that, and I looked at he's like 4 million followers or something insane. But he did sound a little bit like not 100% happy. I think he was going through some stuff. So it's kind of and you need to go out and hunt that tiger and pursue it, and because if you didn't follow through your ambitions because they're not going to taste as good at the end, then what are you going to do instead? Do nothing.
Yeah.
So look, I I think the freedom fallacy is a very real thing, but also we need to strive.
I think we need to strive, and I think the main thing is just to make sure that you're striving for the right thing. And so, like, I'm not going to be unrealistic and say that I don't want to make money off of this podcast or make more money than I make now, but it's what that money buys me that's more important. And that's why I put freedom in the fallacies, because it's the freedom that I'm looking for. I would love to wake up one day and just be like, right, what am I going to do today? And I'm making that decision. No one else is telling me. I'm not living on someone else's schedule. And so that's like, I think if it's something that's that fundamental that you're striving for, then that's probably the right thing to strive for. But if it's money, if it's fame, if it's I don't know, shame or guilt or comparison, then these things are toxic. And so I think freedom's one of the big things. Is if you're striving for that, it's maybe not going to be such a disappointment later, as long as you appreciate it. Maybe
it's an interesting one because my first book was called This Restless Life, and it looked at, is it better to have a big life, a big global, global careers, travel everywhere, have money, or is a smaller, deeper life more satisfying? And can you have both? Like what's the trade-off? And at the time I was living in the UK, I was traveling a lot. I was very much living the big life, not necessarily the deep life. And sometimes freedom can be a trap because it means you reject commitment, and commitment is often where there's, I think satisfaction or maybe not joy, but it has its definite pleasures. So freedom's a tough one for me. I'm a big freedom. I love freedom. And I often make decisions based on freedom. But I'm now coming around to the fact that commitment and having fewer freedoms can actually be satisfying in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that I took from, like, I spoke to Oliver Burkeman a few months ago, and one of the things I took from him was the power of being on everyone else's schedule. And so, like, a lot of people will say, like, a 9 to 5 job, they maybe don't want to do that, and which I suppose is understandable. But there's also a great benefit of being on everyone else's schedule. You feel more connected to everyone around you, and the opposite's true. If you're on a different schedule, if you're like not in the same shift pattern as your partner or your friends or things like that, like, it can have such a profound impact on your mental health. And so there is something to be said for, like, having limited freedom. I think it's just there's certain people maybe that, like, I know I can't, like, that's not for me. I know for sure that's not for me. And I know for sure that if I had the freedom that I'm striving for, that I wouldn't not commit, or I would just like squander it.
Yeah.
I know that I would wake
Yeah.
up and go, right, I'm going to do a podcast today, I'm going to do some writing today. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's.
It sounds like autonomy. Like you want autonomy.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, yeah,
And freedom's almost like slightly different. I mean, there's
yes,
been
yeah.
so many studies that say workers are much happier if they're autonomous. You know, I think there was a British civil service huge longitudinal study that said the higher up the civil servants were, the happier they were. And researchers were like, oh, why are these people with more stress happier? And it's because they had more autonomy. They were able to, come into work when they needed to, um, have a long lunch, not having to clear it with anyone. And there's a lot to be said for autonomy.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the managers, when I look back on my working life so far, that the majority of the managers I like give me the independence to kind of and trust that I will do the work, and the ones that I don't are the micromanagers that are asking every 10 minutes, "Oh, what are you up to now?" Or "You
Yeah,
getting this thing
yeah.
done?" And then you're just kind of like, "Leave me alone! Like it's getting done.
Oh,
Like
it's
don't worry."
hell. It's
Yeah, yeah,
hellish.
yeah. You've spoken about negative visualization, so that's one of the ones I use quite a lot, whether consciously or unconsciously. Can you explain what negative visualization is and how beneficial it can be?
Yeah, so it's an old Stoic technique. Epictetus talks about it quite sort of brutally in the Enchiridion, which is when you put your child to bed, you should imagine that the child dies in the night. So if the child does happen to die in the night, you have already given yourself a taste of what that feels like because you visualized it and you're theoretically more prepared for that outcome. It's also used in things like visualizing if you're going to the doctor that you get negative, you get test results that show you have cancer. Think about that before you go in, and if the test results are clear, you feel more relieved because you've imagined the worst. But if the test results are positive and you do have cancer, you've prepared yourself mentally. So that's the kind of thinking behind negative visualization. It can give you anxiety if you stay in the negative too long. You can get all quite worked up. So when I was doing Reasons Not to Worry, I was doing a lot of negative visualization and not coming out of it soon enough, which meant that I was like quite anxious for I think a whole summer when I was writing that. I was like, freaked out. Now I just kind of tap into the negative and then tap off straight away.
I think also like this can negative visualization can maybe happen to someone unconsciously. I found that people that, and include myself in this, people that have lost someone at a young age, the impact of that can be negative visualization. Like for me, I started to just really realize, oh, am I running out of time now? Or I started thinking about, oh, what's going to happen when I die? Or I better not waste this life now. But then that can lead so far towards the anxiety side of it, where that is something that I struggle with now, is just feeling like I'm running out of time, feeling like I've not got much time left to do all the things I want to do, even though I've just turned 30. There is time, but I think it's the difference between, say, losing someone that's almost expected, a grandparent, a parent, everyone kind of loses that, but to lose someone that's young, it kind of has that unconscious impact on your own life.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of not just a negative visualization. That is an entire kind of negative chapter, but also a very important one, which is you realize we're all mortal, and that for the Stoics was kind of one of the most important, if not the most important lesson. And they spent a lot of their lives preparing for their deaths, which is not something we do at all now, really, in modern times. But they didn't kind of ruminate, but they were very, very aware of mortality.
We're speaking about freedom there. Now, we won't go into the kind of the intricacies of the free will debate, but one of the ways that I use it when I'm viewing other people is if I think that if I believe that you have far less control over your life, then any wrong you do to me, I can view it through that lens. Like, oh, you didn't choose where you grew up, your upbringing, your parents, what happened to you externally, or what happened to you even that day. And so if you're going to cut me off in traffic, I'm going to try and think, okay, maybe something's happening there. It's an emergency. You've not had a good day. You're not choosing to do that. And so it's a very useful lens for viewing other people and viewing their grievances. And another one that's related to that is just to view everyone like a grown-up child, which essentially they are. Like we're all just figuring it out, and this is everyone else. Like, this is our first time living. I can't remember who said that, but it's everyone else's first time living, and so if someone's rude or someone just makes a mistake, or I don't like a classic one would be like the someone brings you the wrong food at a restaurant or something like that, screws up your order, like.
Yeah.
They didn't necessarily choose that, and like they're maybe having a bad day. They maybe didn't choose that. Something's happened to them. Yeah, just viewing people through those sorts of empathetic lenses, I think, is very useful in terms of what you can do and what you can actually control. You can't control what other people are doing, and so
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're in an epidemic at the moment of kind of rage and anger.
Yeah.
We've got a piece coming out next week in The Guardian about it, about, the it's in Australia, it's probably everywhere, like the increase in hostility towards retail workers, public transit. So bus drivers have had this huge, I think it's threefold increase in abuse of customers and airline staff. So something is causing us, the public, to absolutely take it out on people who are here to help. And it's particularly, unstoic. Firstly, the Stoics, really despised anger. They saw that there was no reason to be angry. That's an emotion you can control. So they talked about feeling anger coming up, rising. You have this sort of first movement, which is the feeling in your stomach, the blood pressure, and then you catch it and you stop it and you suppress it. And you respond far less emotionally in a way that doesn't damage or hurt the other person. Because you're hurting the other person, you're also hurting yourself. So how many kind of incidents have escalated because someone's gotten angry at you and then you've gotten angry at them, and then you can't get out of it. So I used to work as a lawyer doing kind of small criminal matters, and the amount of kind of fight, particularly bar fights or, road rage because someone just didn't control themselves at the initial, incident. Um, when you were talking before about compassion for others, like, reminds me of that brilliant David Foster Wallace essay. I think it was a commencement speech called "This Is Water," which is about recognizing that other people who you come in contact with have their own interior life, their own stories, their own tragedies, and they are people just like you. And so by treating them as basically they're on earth to be your servants and lashing out if they don't do exactly what you want is so uncivil. And it's inhumane. So part of what we need to do is recognizing every Uber driver, every supermarket worker, every colleague has this rich, vivid inner life. They're going to fuck up just as much as you are. They're going to have bad days. But Seneca said, we're bad men living amongst bad men, and only one thing can calm us, and that is we must agree to go easy on one another.
Yeah, it's so true. I think as well, like, how do you, I know you've spoken about this before, how do you thread the needle between concentrating on what you can control and like global existential issues, so activist issues, climate change, inequalities, war? How do you thread the needle between, like, you don't want to ignore these issues, but you also you don't want to focus on them so much that you feel powerless. How do you thread that needle within Stoicism?
Yeah, it's I think it's the question for our age. I've recently returned to X.com. I was scrolling on it before. It's like
Yeah,
you can go mad. You can go mad. Like it's only
for sure.
February, it's already world events are so unhinged. It's so crazy. Epstein files have just been released. They're like extremely depressing. Um, in terms of just how those women and girls were abused. There's, I mean, I could go on what's going on in the world. So I mean, as a Stoic, the things you do are you apply the control test. So,
Mm,
bunch of powerful people are pedophiles. Can I control what happened then? No, I can't control it. I don't even know these people. Um, so if I can't control it, if I can't do anything about it, I really shouldn't worry about it, I shouldn't be up at night scrolling, and because that's going to ruin what the Stoics called the ataraxia, which is the equilibrium. So it's very, very important to maintain that at all times. Maintain a cool head, because when you're going about your life, and if you've been upset because you've been doom scrolling, and then you get into that car accident or that fender bender, or your soup's cold, in the restaurant, you're then much more likely, because you're not coming from a stable place, you're wound up. You're then much more likely to be reactive and to have the anger, and then to have something escalate. So you're actually contributing to the negative vibe in the world. So firstly, I ask, can I control it? If I can't control it, I park it. And secondly, I look at my own behavior, which I can control. Am I spending, like, what's my phone usage? Like, it's out of control. It's like 6 hours a day. Like, oh my God, what sites am I on? I'm on all the news websites. I'm on X.com. I just left Instagram because it's like I was on there too much. And it wasn't a positive experience. So, I can control my internet use. I can control how much news I'm consuming. So, you know, I have to maintain my own equilibrium. Otherwise, I'm going to be terrible to other people. So, yeah.
mm,
So that's how I handle um the current negativity. In terms of activism, or making the world a better place, I've done anti-death penalty work um that has sought to assist people on death row. That has had varying degrees of success. Um, and that's work. If it doesn't work out, um, then the person is executed. And so the control test is so important, because you can advocate for someone on death row, but you can't control whether or not they're executed, because that's in, like other people's hands, obviously. And so it's important to maintain the control test for not just that, but if you're fighting for climate change, you can do your little piece, but can you stop oil being dug out of the ground? No, you can't. Your little bit might be able to help. And then most recently, I've been working in federal politics as a parliamentary speechwriter to two different ministers, because I thought, okay, I can possibly assist in the mainstream, like within a system, help ministers craft what they're going to say in a way that's really clear and hopefully really concise, that can then help people understand difficult policies. So the ministers I worked for had really interesting portfolios, from the women's portfolio to environment and water to finance. So yeah, so there's different ways a Stoic can engage,
mm,
but ultimately the control test is something that needs to be kept front of mind.
Mm. I think as well, like another thing we can control is what news we actually look at. I think
Yeah.
like the bad news is the stuff that makes the headlines because it's shocking, but the good news tends to be like gradual and boring. So you look at like global poverty rates are always going down. There's always like tens of thousands amount of people every day that are lifted out of extreme poverty, but we never see that in the news because it's not sexy. It's not the new. It's not shocking. And so I think also just making a concentrated effort to kind of balance your news consumption with, and it's not to ignore the bad news, but it's just to counterbalance it with the good news that is certainly happening every day.
Yeah, I think people are thirsting for good news. Like, there's a great story this week out of Western Australia, which was a 13-year-old boy who swam for 4 hours to raise an
Mm,
alarm that his family had drifted 14 kilometers off the coastline and then sprinted for a couple of miles, and
mm,
and his family were rescued and they're all fine. And I think, the global response to that story has been like, oh, how wonderful. Same with a few years back, the Thai cave rescue story. They they were all
mm,
they were all safe. So I think, the global poverty stuff, we do forget about, but we do like our little dose of um of good news along with all the bad, because people can't take, there's only so much people can take of bad news.
mm.
Mm. So that sounds like a nice place to kind of segue into our quick fire questions to end the episode. Nice
Yes.
positive place. Um, so what are three wellness practices or supplements that you still use today that you used, say, when you're writing Wellmania?
Yeah. I do yoga. So I've been at a yoga class this afternoon in Bali. I think it's great for flexibility, stretching, mindfulness, all that sort of stuff. So I still do yoga. I meditate twice a day, Vedic meditation. Um, and I love retreats when I can afford them. I like going on, getting a period of time where I go away with a group, and I'm on a writing retreat at the moment. It's just a self-writing retreat, but carving out time to go and do creative work or go and do spiritual work, or just stepping out of my life.
Mm. It's interesting that two of those wellness practices you can do for free.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can
Yeah.
kind of all do them for free.
Mm,
You can make your own little retreat at home and call it a retreat.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
That's
true. Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
could create a group of friends, WhatsApp group, and practice something like
Yeah.
Stoicism,
Stoicism.
and then group up every week.
Yeah.
Um, so this question's from Tim Ferriss. I don't want to like steal someone's question, but what's the best purchase of we'll say $100 or less, that you found?
Oh, the best purchase that I've had under $100. I think a really good lipstick. So a
Okay.
Okay.
Dior lipstick. Um, I don't wear much makeup, but I wear lipstick and mascara. And sometimes when you're feeling a bit flat, just a beautiful bright lipstick can make you feel like $1,000,000. So yeah,
Interesting.
maybe
What
not for you.
is
Maybe
no?
it's
Well, you never know. What
What is your favorite Stoic quote?
there's so many. Um,
mm,
there's I mean, Marcus Aurelius, as we've said earlier, is such a beautiful writer. So al- there's one, although you break your heart, men will go on as before, I think is one, which is always like, fuck, it kills me,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's like your heart's broken and men will go on. So that's
yeah.
a
That's a good
really
one.
that's a really great one. And there's one at the start of uh uh I don't have it. I'd have to Google it. But like, yeah, there's some at the start of Reasons Not to Worry that are my favorites. I just can't recall them
Hmm.
right now.
I'm just checking. So there's a quote. I don't want to butcher it. I want to actually get it. I'm just looking it up.
Can I just say one? The other one I really like of his.
Go for it.
Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. I think, wow, that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
What a
Who was
guy,
that?
Was that Marcus Aurelius?
Marcus. Yeah.
And is that in Meditations as well?
Yep. Yep.
See, it's just bonkers. You can write something that beautiful, and you're not like you didn't want anyone to read it. Like, oh, it's almost frustrating that you could write that beautifully.
Yeah, and it's look,
Yeah.
it's translations. So I I
Yeah,
have
of
been known
course.
to
Yeah.
use dodgy translations, but it's this the sentiment is so gorgeous, which is like, who's around you? Don't go looking.
Yeah.
These are your people.
Mhm.
Fate has brought you together. It binds you together. So love them with all your heart. And I just think, wow, it's really nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So the quote I had is from Charlotte Joko Beck. I think she's a possibly a Buddhist, Zen teacher. That's what it is. And the quote is, "What makes it unbearable is your mistaken belief that it can be cured."
Ooh, that's interesting. Why do you like that one? What's
Well, I think if you apply that to life, I just like the amount of times that I think, oh, like this next, like I'm susceptible to thinking this next, say, supplement or this next
yeah,
wellness practice, for instance, this will solve the problems, and it's like an unconscious thing. I always do it, and
yeah,
then inevitably I buy the thing or I start the practice. It doesn't solve the problem, and
yeah,
it's quite freeing. It's one of the reasons I love like Oliver Burkeman's writing is it's quite freeing to know that I can't control it and it's not going to cure it. Life, there's always going to be problems in life. The washing basket's never going to be empty for long. I'm never
yeah,
going to get on top of everything, and it's quite freeing to know that. It's like then you can actually concentrate on the things that you can and you should concentrate on. You can just minimize
Minimize.
it right down. And so like thinking that life can be cured is just not, it's not a route towards, I was going to say happiness, but not happiness. That's not, maybe like contentment.
Or
contentment.
something like
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting being in Bali at the moment, surrounded by influencers, is this thing of like you can see they're all like, you know, taking their supplements, drinking their juices, but not really smiling, not emanating happiness. Happiest people I've ever met on the planet are actually the Balinese, who have um, a culture of hospitality and a
Mm.
huge sort of spiritual practice. Like spirituality runs through their veins, and just the warmth and happiness of Balinese people is
Mhm.
extraordinary. Whereas the influencers, they'll be kind of surly and then they'll get the camera out to do a selfie and then they
Yeah.
so
I think
yeah,
I
I
think
think
makes
it's
me
there's something
something
to
to
wonder.
be
be.
said for connection. Like you're not going to look back on your life and think about that say like the video you posted on Instagram that got this many likes or how much money you made or like your status. You're going to be looking back at like good times with people. And so
Yeah,
why would you focus so much of your time on people you've never met before? Like
Well,
I
yeah,
yeah,
but
could
it's
fall
also said.
exactly.
susceptible to that. I'm looking at views, I'm looking at comments, and I like you get a negative comment and you think, oh God, maybe he's right. But then it's like, well,
Well,
I don't know this person. He's like he's not even he could be a chat bot. He could be anyone. And
and
why
Yeah.
I
would
would,
I worry about what he's saying? People aren't going to like what I say, and that's fine.
and
Yeah,
it's
I
just,
mean,
yeah.
the Stoics would say don't never read the comment. I mean, I never read
I
any
know it's so
comments.
hard. Yeah.
I just don't, because it's like you don't know you don't know if the person's engaged with your work in good faith, or
Hmm.
if they don't like you for some other um that was like working at the Guardian was just the comment section was just like horrible. It was so
Hmm.
bad. So yeah, I mean Richard Flanagan, who's a brilliant writer, he Booker winner. I mean, his whole thing is like don't read the bad reviews, but it also means you can't read the good reviews. You have to,
Mm.
and that's
Yeah.
also a Stoic thing, which is you can't pick and choose. So if you're going to pick not to read the
Mm.
comments, which is what I've picked. I also can't solicit praise, because that's just one-sided. So yeah, but we're all learning.
Yeah, I think it's also like I can't remember who said it is. Don't take advice from someone whose life you wouldn't want. And so someone
Someone
Ah,
that's taking the time to post something negative on, let's say, a short that I've posted that's 1 minute long, and they haven't taken the time to actually watch the full episode and comment on this little slither of an episode.
yeah,
Why would I care about what their opinion is? Because I wouldn't want their life if I wouldn't want to be feeling bad about myself that I have to post negativity on someone else's feed. And so it's like that's the other thing. It's just don't take advice from someone whose life you wouldn't want.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll have to remember that. It
Yeah.
comes up.
So we've this isn't so much quick fire now.
Yeah. Sorry.
So another no, that's great. Another question comes from the Actors Studio. If God exists, what do you want them to say when you get to the pearly gates?
What do you want them to say? Y- y- you've now completed. You don't have to do another round down there. You're clear. So come on in. I think at a certain
Good.
point,
Yeah.
being sent back to Earth. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't
don't know
want
if
that.
I could do it again.
Yeah, I think I'd want him to say something like game over, like it's
Game
done.
over.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like,
Yeah.
and you were never going to win. Like this game isn't for winning. So
Game
Perhaps
over.
you have won by entering heaven.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Although I don't know how much I think heaven's actually such a good thing. I think that could actually be a bit unbearable.
Yeah.
If
Well,
it's paradise has its problems.
yeah, we don't know until we go there. I mean, I don't actually believe in heaven, but you
No,
know,
never. Yeah.
maybe this is heaven. Maybe heaven is earth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Or maybe hell is earth. You never know. It
Yeah.
could go either way. Depends.
How
It's
you
like
think.
that. It's like that meme that's going around at the moment that we all died in COVID in 2020, and this is that we're actually living in hell.
Oh God, yeah, I don't want to be thinking about that. I mean that's another problem I think that we have with thinking now is thinking that this is the worst point of humanity that previous generations never had to deal with anything of this magnitude. Yeah, things maybe seem worse than ever, but I mean,
No,
It's
things
not worse
aren't as
than
bad
ever.
as they.
like it's pretty good.
There was a whole year where the sun was blacked out by a volcanic ash. I think it was in
Yeah.
247 or something like that, and
Mm.
people lived without any light for a year. I think that would have been worse than Donald
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah, as horrible as he is. Um, what's the best practice you've found for getting in the chair and writing some words? Because that's just such a struggle, I find.
Mm. Best practice is the mornings. So I don't schedule anything in the morning when I'm writing. I'm actually going to play paddle tomorrow at 9, which is
Nice.
nice. But like, it's the only time I could get, but it's like, oh, it's cutting into my morning. So
Mm.
wake up, meditate, coffee, writing straight away. And I can usually do about 4 hours max. And then I conk out. So, yeah.
Okay, so it's getting your mornings zoned in without distraction, I suppose.
Yeah, mornings are sacred. That's when that's for me. Everyone's different, but my brain is the clearest then, and that's when I get my best work done. So I keep my mornings for creative work.
Right. Well, Brigid, thank you so much for
Thanks
taking
so
the
much,
time. This is
Gregor.
actually this is the longest episode we've ever done.
Ah,
Yeah, these are my favorite. I see this. I've probably said this quite a few episodes. These are my favorite kind of episodes because I have all these questions just to make sure that I'm prepared, so that if I'm having an off day and my mind goes blank or something like that, then I've always got questions ready. But I probably only used probably less than half because
wow.
just things keep coming because the conversation is just so stimulating. So yeah,
Yeah, it was
these are
really
my
great.
favorite sorts of
Thank
episodes.
you. Thank you. Like, it sounds like we have similar, journeys and thinking about a lot of the same things. So yeah, I could really tell you were totally, locked into the wellness stoic,
Yeah. Also,
area.
tell people where they can go to stay up to date with your work. You're writing this
Yeah.
a new novel.
Writing a novel, writing something fun. So I've got a Substack, which is the Chaos Era. So go and subscribe. I write for The Guardian. I write for a publication in Australia called The Monthly, um, and the ABC. The occasional essay there, and yeah, you can watch my show Wellmania on Netflix, and you can buy my books on Amazon. I've just got a new one out called The Seeker and the Sage, which is a Stoic novel. So it is in dialogue, it's a Socratic dialogue between a seeker and a sage, and it explains Stoicism, in quite basic terms, in a story. So yeah, so that's my latest.
Nice.
Thank you,
Well,
Gregor.
when your next book comes out, let's have another conversation because I could have another few
Yeah.
hours of
Yeah,
conversation. So yeah.
fantastic. I'd love that. And if Seeker and Sage is published in over your side of the world, I'll make sure you get a copy.
Oh yeah, perfect.